Hi guys. So Sarah and Emily back here for part two of our common pitfalls that we see when we start to take over consulting or revenue as a service for newer portfolios to us. Not new portfolios, but new to us. So what do we typically see? We did part one, ran out of time because there are quite a few. So we wanted to make sure that we provided a little bit more. So we're just going to keep chugging along with some of our list here. And I'll go ahead and go with the next one here, if that's okay. And
Perfect.
I think that this has become kind of a bigger issue lately. I don't even really want to say that. It's always been a big issue, but ignoring fee load. So we, as revenue managers, typically have historically looked at pricing, but we have the fee load in context. We understand that. Now it's a little bit different with there's a little bit more of an aggregation of what the full price is, although we still price per day for the rental rate. There is more to consider with your fee load. And so when you're in your RMS, you don't always have visibility to what that is, and especially if that gets changed. Like there's no notification that comes through on our end and says, "Oh, the property manager changed the cleaning fee from $250 to $300." So on those two-night bookings where you don't have the length to kind of split those per stay fees up against the length of the reservation, those are disproportionately impacted. So I'm sure you have so many thoughts to add to this, and we can probably talk about this for a whole separate session, but I'll go ahead and stop yapping so you can.
No, you're right. This is a very, I mean, it goes deep, right? And they're per stay fees. They're all the other fees that we've got. There, people will, create inflator fees to cover commissions on the distribution channels. All sorts of fees are out there, and they're not wrong. But when it's not transparent, when it's like, oh, we've got ops over here who's managing these fees, and we've got this group of folks over here who are managing these fees, unless there's visibility and transparency, it's really difficult to kind of manage that from a full holistic standpoint. And so I think that's where I see oftentimes some disconnect. And that's just like, oh, yeah, ops is going to take care of that. Or, you guys just focus on the nightly rate. And you're like, no, 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 no. These are all levers that we may not have full autonomous control over, but we need to understand what we're working with. And so I think that is definitely something that I've seen a lot, and just kind of getting everybody on the same page and making sure that there's communication across lines where maybe there hasn't been in the past. We don't necessarily have to be the ones to control everything, although we do like to control everything. But I mean, it's imperative for us to know.
Right, right. Like we kind of talked about in the last session, everybody's strategy is going to be a little bit different. You're going to have hosts that maybe are doing their own cleaning, and so they can be a little bit more competitive. And so I think that some of the changes that we've had recently have definitely changed the landscape on how we look at it on the front end. But on the back end, I guess I say the back end, it's still the front end of our software, but the back end of where we do the actual work, there's still a heavy reliance on ADR to ADR or pushed rate to pushed rate. We don't always have that visibility. So it's just something to keep in mind before you just go changing fees, that there is a whole ecosystem to think about, and they're all affected a little bit differently. So there's some downstream effects for sure.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to consider, something that we mentioned in the last episode, was kind of the idea of seasonality, right? Well, this is where seasonality really matters. If you're in a soft, down, off-peak time and you've got low lengths of stay, for example, just understand that if you're not also yielding fees and being aware of what's happening on the fee side, that could be affecting conversion on some level. And that's where, from a revenue management standpoint, we can price, we can set, certain restrictions or whatever, but unless we have full visibility into what's really happening on a holistic level, and there are a bunch of different, roadblocks and obstacles to, ease of conversion because of whatever it may be, you're not going to convert. In which, again, kind of, we're doing a little bit of a review here, but these are the kinds of things, again, you're not going to see from your competitor side, but you have to keep in mind, what is your strategy and what are you going for? And these fees and things like that are that's a lever that you have, and you can flip that when it's going to make sense for you. And so I think that's really, really important to kind of think through, especially from a season standpoint. And you might be loosening up on your restrictions, you might be lowering your price and things, but if you're not also addressing your fees, or at least considering them, you're probably missing a pretty significant portion of what's going on.
Right. Like these decisions definitely have to be made in tandem or made with the lens that, hey, this has an effect on things outside of just my cleaning bottom line. This affects other areas. And so even if you raise your fees, it might mean that your revenue manager has to go in and come right back behind you and lower your rates just because it's slowing bookings and all of that. So there's this yin and yang that happens there. And I just had a thought pop into my head while you were talking. I'm trying to remember it because it was a good one. Oh, okay. It wasn't as great as I thought, but it's still. I was like, I gotta ask Sarah that because it seems so obvious to us because we know what's happened in the market or just how the landscape has changed. But I've noticed this happening a little bit more and more, where owners are anchoring their ADR to what's being shown on Airbnb, not completely understanding that now it includes fees. And so they're like, uh, Joe from down the street is getting $500 a night. I put in 2 nights for a reservation, but what they're not seeing is that's including all of those extra fees now. So when they get their statements and it's exclusive of fees, then they're like, but I only got $250 a night. Why is Joe doing 2 times more than me? So
Joe didn't book because no, excuse me, because you
there's
saw
that
Joe's
too.
name.
Did Joe actually book?
Yeah, right. But I mean, yeah, that's a good point because you know that the owners are always out there looking and comparing, and the easiest thing to do is to point a finger and be like, "You're not doing your job because my rates are too high or my rates are too low," or all of these things. And you're right. There's so many things that are built in now to the pricing and the total out the door cost on these channels that you can't figure out what all of those things are. And so that total cost becomes even more relevant and more important now. And then, talking to owners, I mean, that's a big deal too. It's always been important to communicate to owners, but it's even more important now that we can explain to them like what they're actually seeing and what they're not seeing.
Right, right. Having that level of communication and transparency and training and education has become, more of a priority, or just, we've had to do a little bit more on that regard. So moving on, because I know that we only have a few more minutes here and we only got through one.
Oops.
There's a bad day. This is not necessarily something that I see with established portfolios a lot, but when you're kind of talking, on the boards, or you run into somebody that has a home that they're advertising themselves or smaller portfolios. On the rare occasion, you do see it with larger portfolios, and there probably is a reason. But writing off a whole channel just because you had a bad experience. Or I had a friend recently buy a vacation rental property, and she's like, I've been hearing that Airbnb is just dead. Airbnb is dead. What's going on? And I was like, okay, what have you been reading? It's not dead. There are just ways that you need to use it and not take one experience and write off the whole channel. So I think when you get to a certain level, you kind of understand that it's that partner that you can't afford to lose. A lot of times when it brings in that much business, and it's not to say that you can't have a full, a very profitable portfolio with just a couple channels, because you can, but when you write off one whole channel or you don't put in the effort to optimize that channel, you're doing yourself a huge disservice because you don't know what it can do. It kind of leads to the next point too. I don't know if Sarah, you have anything to add there.
I mean, I just think that not only do you write it off without knowing, but part of it could be like, maybe you're right, maybe that's not a good channel for you, but unless you kind of explore that and
Right.
look, you'll never know, because like we say, everything is different. Your home portfolio, location, strategies, they're all different, which means all of the different things are going to function differently. So I would encourage you to explore as much as you can. And if you can check it off the list because it doesn't work and you've done the work to figure it out, great. But to just write it off as, oh, I heard that this is difficult or this doesn't get good reach or, the
Or I had one
more
bad
likely it's
experience.
right. Or more likely it's the fact that if somebody's saying that, they just aren't using it right.
Right.
No. So that's and it's not even that they're not using it right, but it might not be good for their business, right? So explore everything. If it doesn't work, great, we tried. But
At least
don't discount trying.
when I'm talking about the channels, it kind of gets deeper because as you are a bigger portfolio, you start to explore a lot more of the niche channels. But originally, I was alluding to the folks that we kind of run into, and they're like either Airbnb, Verbo, or Booking.com. Like some of the top ones, they're like, we just won't do it. We just don't list there. There are entire markets. When I was working in Destin a couple years ago, there was this huge disparity between Airbnb and Verbo. And it's like most of the folks there just didn't like Airbnb. And I was full force on Airbnb. We got a ton of bookings. We did great with that channel. So you have to kind of explore, especially for those bigger channels. Now, if you're going into a niche channel and you're trying something out and you're like, that doesn't really work for me, it's low lift to try it and all of that, then by all means, keep it running if it doesn't cost you money. Cut it if it's too hard to maintain or it's too expensive, you're not seeing results. Like you do want to try those things. But to look at the main channels and be like, no, my friend didn't like that one, or they refunded a guest because of a bad experience, or I didn't respond to a message within 30 minutes and they refunded the guest. They all have those horror stories, but it doesn't mean that it can't make up for it in other ways. He likes that. We all get very frustrated when that happens, but you don't, cut your nose off to spite your face at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I mean the other thing is too, if you're just, kicking butt on Verbo, it's going to take a little bit to kind of gain some traction on Airbnb. So it's like if you're really reliant on one and then you add another and you're like, oh, I just can't get anything. Well, I mean, these channels are also built for, certain things too. So if Airbnb is like, okay, well, we're not booking over here. I mean, we talk about the flywheel a lot, like with these
Right.
channels. It's really tough to kind of, if you're super reliant on one to get over to the other one and be successful. Well, yeah, you're booking everything over here. Why would this channel reward you, for that? So, I mean, there's so many different things, and that's a rabbit hole. Talk about rabbit holes.
I know. I
But
was like,
yeah,
jump on that rabbit hole.
I know. But I mean, those things are all real, and it doesn't mean it's the channel's fault, right? You still have to leverage the ones that make the most sense for you. And unless you're, displacing bookings, try them all. Like, why not?
Right. Just because I cannot help myself, I do have to throw in this comment because it's so, so, so valid. If you don't have any sort of, if you're not spread across multiple channels, then your risk exposure is extremely high in one channel. So I see these folks that are on, the Facebook boards and, they're talking about, they're in groups and they're saying, my whole account got banned. I have no income now. That's a scary place to be. Now, if your whole account gets banned on Airbnb, at least you can have Verbo or Booking.com or, other channels to support that. And that goes with if you have one home or you have thousands of homes. You want to try to spread that risk out because otherwise you're not a business owner, you're an employee. And
That's right.
without a contract, you can get cut at any point. So it's just not smart business to put all of your eggs in one basket. And I will leave it there because I can go on for another hour, but I do not want to bore everybody. So,
All
okay.
right, we're running out of time,
I
so
know,
let's
I
pick
know. We'll
one.
go. So
Pick one.
let's do another one. This is a really easy one. Not letting price discover the ceiling, right? So a lot of times we get a new portfolio and we look at the data and maybe it's a $700 historical booking, but the demand says it could go up to $1,500, and then we set the price at, maybe we set it at $1,500 just to kind of see we've got enough time, and then all of a sudden it books. But we have to talk to the property managers and the owners in order to get them to be on board, because in their mind they're like, never seen a price that high. It'll never in a million years rent for that. So,
and then you can kind of flip that on its head, right? What we always hear about are the minimums. Well, this owner won't take less than $200 a night. This, and at this time of the year. And, we hear about ceilings, and ceilings oftentimes, revenue managers, we use that to protect ourselves, right? From something that absolutely could never happen until it does. But then, on the other side of that, right, is like, okay, well, we're going to listen to the owner and say, okay, it's $200. But, you can see in the different pricing tools, like where that price really kind of wants to be. And maybe
right.
it's at $150. So at the same time, while it might want to go to $1,600 at the top and it might want to go to $150 at the bottom, I mean, that's kind of like netting itself out. So if we were to, let the algorithm, the pricing tool go, could we actually convert at those super high rates and then allow it to convert at a lower than comfortable rate? And would it just kind of net itself out in the process? Like, oftentimes we put our own handcuffs on ourselves. And not to say that you shouldn't be putting limits on yourself or your properties. There may be a really good reason for it. Absolutely. I would never say that you shouldn't. But I think we have to consider, like, what's the big picture that's happening? Because just because we artificially put a ceiling or a floor on something doesn't mean that we're right.
Right.
In the same way that it doesn't mean the algorithm's right just because it's going to go, right?
Right, right. It's about being able to test out those price points. And sometimes you're doing it with individual properties, and sometimes you're doing it with individual dates, just trying to see where things are going to land and having that feedback and iterating, constantly iterating. And I really want to go into my next point, but I think we're going to have to save it for a part 3 because this one's a big one. So this is getting longer than we originally intended, but this one's going to take several minutes to talk about. So want to wrap this up, and any of our, anybody that's watching, if you're experiencing any of these problems, or you're a property manager and you feel like you just need a little bit of help, or you're just like, I'm done with it. I don't even want to do with this anymore. Stop showing me these videos. Just do it for me. We can help you out no matter what your goals are. So make sure to reach out to us if you have any questions, and we're happy to answer in the comments and all of that, but look out for part 3.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Bye.